Chapter 22. The Harvest of Souls. As David led the new team through the temple chambers, the sound of the rain hitting the stonework was muffled to them. Only the rain near the entrance echoed around the front corridor like a military celebration loudly lit. They were all grateful to be inside, but there was a sense of adventure in the air as well. As they reached the hidden stone passage, their eyes grew wide like yawning mouths. David spoke up first. "Take a look at this. The stonework is just incredible." He gestured to the walls, which were made up of perfectly placed stones, each one snugly fit without a gap. "It's as if they were molded together without mortar." Ryan nodded in agreement. "This is truly a wonder of the world. How did they manage to do this so many centuries ago?" Mary tentatively traced a finger over the lines. "It's amazing to think, just to think that this temple has stood all this time, all these years while remaining in such pristine condition." Peter and Lauren couldn't help but run their hands along the smooth surface, feeling its workmanship. David smiled. He thought to himself, "I never tire of this place. Every time something new I never noticed before." As they continued deeper into the passage, the sound of a dripping echoed in the distance. They couldn't help but wonder what other secrets this temple might hold. As they made their way deeper into the hidden stone passage, David and the team suddenly came upon a gruesome sight. Lying on the ground before them were human and animal skeletons, some of which still had bits of decaying flesh hanging from the bones. The girls among the team were horrified, their faces pale with fear. David, who had seen such things before, tried to ease their fears. "Don't worry," he said calmly. "What we're seeing here must be the remains of a Nephilim's meal. It was living here until it was killed by one of the local tribes." As he spoke, the girls huddled closer together, still looking nervously at the skeletons. "Nephilim?" asked Mary, her voice trembling. "What?" "Half human and half angel," David explained. "Very strong and nearly invincible." Ryan and Peter, who were more knowledgeable about the Bible, stepped forward to take a closer look. "Incredible," said Ryan. "I never would have believed such creatures actually still existed." "You actually saw it?" David nodded. "I was nearly its next victim." "How did you escape?" Mary asked. "Deodorant," David said. Pause. Laughter. Mary looked quizzically, but her expression was lost in the dark. "The world is full of mysteries and wonders that we have yet to find," David said. "We just have to keep our eyes and minds open." As the team made their way through the winding tunnel of perfectly laid stones, they soon encountered a problem. The once smaller stream David had followed uphill on his previous visit was now joined by several multiple streams due to the monsoon rains. The sound of rushing water filled the air as the streams joined branches coming from different tunnels. David gazed around the cavern, his eyes scanning the area as he tried to remember which flow he had followed before. The team huddled together, waiting for David's guidance. David rubbed his chin, deep in thought. He remembered the turns he had taken, the landmarks he had passed, but now everything looked different and the walls of the cavern were now slick with moisture. "They're counting on me. Can't let them down." "All right. Wait here. I'll have to explore each stream to find the one that I followed before. Look for any signs that might help me identify it," David thought. The team nodded. David took a deep breath and stepped into the water, feeling the cold water rush against his legs. He walked slowly, eyes fixed on the stream ahead. The sound of the water grew as he approached a fork in the stream. Left. "Hope it's good." Finally, he saw familiar markings on the walls and heard echoes that reminded him of his previous journey. A smile spreading across David's face as he recognized the familiar surroundings. "This is it," David exclaimed, relief flooding over him. He called out to the team, but his voice didn't carry around the bend or over the sound of the water. He felt suddenly very alone and stumbled back through the water to the cavern to find them. It felt off down here. They had turned off their lights to preserve power, so the cavern was very dark and over the water, hard to tell if it was empty or not. "Hey guys? This is it," David exclaimed again. The team let out a cheer and they continued on their journey, the sound of the rushing water fading behind them as they made their way closer to the village of Mangari. As David and the team moved upwards, they were trying their best to stay on the sides of the tunnel to keep their feet dry. However, the tunnel began to get narrower and narrower. At some point, David warned, "We will have to go into the water to crawl out of the tunnel and into the jungle." The air stayed damp. The water level was rising and the current was starting to pick up speed, making it more difficult to keep their footing. David pressed on, leading the way, with the team following closely behind. They were all soaking wet, clothes gluing to skin, and hair was matted to their heads. They were soon crawling on their hands and knees, trying to keep their heads above the water as much as possible. It was becoming increasingly difficult to see where they were going as the water level continued to rise. At times, they were forced to swim, trying to keep their heads above the water as much as possible, but the current pulled on them like a weighty anchor, and it was a struggle to make any progress. Their legs and arms felt like large soggy bags of wet flour, but they kept moving them on toward what they could only imagine was the way out. Each moment stretched thin, like a long piece of fresh nylon, and these moments piled up like a mountain of restaurant dishes, seemingly without a clean sink in sight. But at last, David caught sight of a tiny dob of light, like a dob of paint floating up ahead. "We have to dive. See that? We have to dive under the water now to get out." He was yelling over the deafening sound of rushing water. "How long do we have to hold our breath?" asked Mary. Evil whispers in her imagination had been taunting her with the possibility of drowning, and she had been fighting them down into the pit of her stomach for hours. Now she would have to brave the depths of these rushing streams of water that now filled the tunnel. "I've never timed it," he shouted. "Last time there wasn't this much water. Tell you what. I'll go first and then come back. You time me. Just all count out loud. Okay? Ready?" The ceiling was slanting down into the water, the light was poking through just beyond it. As they approached the wall of rock that would soon force their head under to move forward, the team felt a sense of nervousness. "Go!" And David was gone, diving under the rock wall. The team started loudly counting out the seconds out loud together. 1, 2, 3. At 30 seconds, David had not returned. Mary began to panic and broke her concentration. "What if he doesn't make it? What if I can't hold my breath this long?" She started breathing more quickly. "Mary, stop," Ryan said with sudden authority in his voice in spite of his relative youthfulness. "God is with us." And he reached out to find her shoulder for reassurance. He grabbed a slight fragment of rock jutting out of the side of the tunnel and steadied her so she could rest for a moment. Lauren began to sing with every spare breath. "King of Kings and Lord of Lords," she sang. Peter quickly joined and soon they were all singing. At last David popped up to the sound of their singing. "Sorry guys. I just dropped my stuff before I came back. It actually takes less time than whatever you counted to. And you're not even counting." "Mary?" Ryan questioned. I'll go first," she volunteered bravely. One by one, they took a deep breath and dived into the water. The experience was disorienting as they were submerged in the dark, cold water. The force of the water was strong, and they had to fight to keep their minds calm, but they had the Holy Spirit with them to help them win that fight. Finally, they reached the other side and emerged from the water, gasping for air but victorious. Cold and soaked, and back in the jungle, the rain still fell, but they had made it. As David and the team emerged from the water-filled tunnel, he strained his ears, listening for the sounds of the Mangari village. But all he could hear was the pitter-patter of raindrops hitting the jungle canopy and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. He was unsure of the direction to head in, and with the rain continuing to pour down, visibility was limited. "We need to find shelter," David said, turning to the team. Ryan, Mary, Peter, and Lauren nodded in agreement. "Let's stay right here," David suggested, "and wait for the rain to subside." David and the team quickly set up camp under the canopy of the jungle trees. They rummaged through their packs for dry clothes sealed in plastic bags. The rain was currently a steady drizzle. In their tents, they stripped off their wet clothes, shivering as the cool air hit their skin. They quickly changed into dry clothes, feeling relieved and more comfortable. By evening, the rain had all but stopped. Drips continued off the remaining pools of water on the jungle leaves with every whisper of the wind. The fire they lit only smoldered. They huddled around the fire, taking turns holding their hands out to the warmth, and chatting quietly about the journey so far and what they would do next. They were all grateful for the break from the rain and the chance to rest and regroup. The next morning in the jungle, the team was awoken by a voice calling out to them. They rubbed the sleep from their eyes and stumbled out of their tents to find a Mangari tribesman standing before them. The man's face lit up with recognition as he saw David, and he rushed over to greet him. "David," the man said in his native accent, a wide smile spreading across his face. David introduced the team to the Mangari, but he only nodded and signaled to lead them back to the village. The team gratefully accepted and followed the man through the jungle, marveling at the beauty of their surroundings despite the rain. As they approached the village, the team could hear the sounds of children laughing and the smell of cooking fires wafting through the air. They were welcomed back with open arms by the villagers, and the team there was overjoyed to finally be back in a place of safety and comfort. The team dried their clothes properly now on a bigger fire and settled in, grateful for the warm hospitality of the Mangari people and the break from the rain. They were content to rest and in the relative comfort of the village. As the remains of light sun began to drip into the twilight, the team huddled around a small fire, voices low as they discussed their next move. Ryan spoke up first, his deep voice carrying across the clearing. "I think we should split up," he said. "Some of us should stay here with the Mangari, while others should head back to the Karamunga tribe village." Lauren nodded. "Good idea," she said. "We need to make sure we have a presence in both villages, and can provide support to both communities." Susan said, "Ryan should be working with me on a Bible translation." Peter chimed in. "I agree. He can stay here with the Mangari, which means I think I can be of more help elsewhere." David nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "I think that's a good plan," he said. "But we need to be careful. The journey back to the Karamunga tribe village will be difficult in this weather, and we don't want to put anyone in unnecessary danger." Mary added, "I can head back to the Karamunga tribe village with Peter." The group continued to discuss the plan, weighing the pros and cons and considering the needs of both communities. As the night drew on, they finally came to a decision, and the team split into two groups, each setting off in their own direction. Peter and Mary would go to the other village while Ryan would stay with the Mangari too with Susan to work on a Bible translation. David would lead Peter and Mary to the Karamunga tribe in the morning. The next day was a busy one, with Lauren jumping right into setting up a school for the Mangari. She was a natural teacher, already thinking about how she could create engaging lessons that would make learning fun for the children and adults. With Susan and Ryan on board to contribute lessons, they were able to start right away. Susan was able to translate passages from the Bible into a more general dialect that would be understandable to all the tribes. She worked closely with Ryan, who was skilled at translation particulars and, like Susan, gifted in picking up new tongues quickly. Between them, they would double-check the translations were accurate and made sense. David, Peter, and Mary, on the other hand, set out for the Karamunga tribe village to set up a similar school. Peter, Mary, and David had set out early in the morning with high hopes of making it to the Karamunga tribal village. The sun was shining bright in the sky and the air was cool, which made their journey comfortable. However, when they left the jungle, the monsoon storms returned with a vengeance. The sky turned dark, and the rain began to pour down again, pelting their skin like little water bombs. The sound of the rain was like a million tiny drum beats, drowning out all other sounds. They had no choice but to continue, as they were exposed in the open air with no shelter in sight. As they trudged on, the low scrub offered no protection from the rain. The soaked earth became slick. The rain was coming down harder, and their spirits were beginning to sink like their feet into the muddy ground beneath. "We have to find shelter," David shouted. "I don't see any shelter anywhere," Mary replied, her voice trembling. What? David shouted. Let's just keep moving. We can't stop now. Peter encouraged loudly. And so, they continued on, their steps becoming more labored as the rain became thicker and weightier. The journey was becoming increasingly difficult, and their limbs felt like they were full of bricks. Finally, in the distance, they saw a rocky outcropping that offered some cover. They made their way there and huddled together. They sat there, catching their breath and trying to regain some energy. The rain continued to pour down, but they were grateful for the shelter. They took a few moments to rest, and then they set out again. As Peter, Mary, and David trudged through the wet and muddy terrain, their clothes clung like thick layers of soggy newspaper, and their muscles soon ached once more. The monsoon rains continued fall. Despite it all, they finally reached the Karamunga tribal village. The villagers were still greeted with smiles and cheers, though several were bemused by these foreigners. How crazy for them to be out in these terrible rains for so long. Some of the villagers had already learned some English, which was a pleasant surprise for the team. After you go, man came to teach who looked like you. He used Bible to teach us your language, so we learned some Bible and English, Bombadil said. David frowned. David, I thought you said you needed extra help here? It seems you've already got more help, Mary said. Impossible? David wondered. Can we meet the man? David said. Where is he now? Peter observed David furrowing his brow and looking troubled. Yes, Bombadil said, and led him to one of the huts. They waited while he went inside. When he returned, there was nobody with him. I sorry. Bombadil shook his head. He not there. He went in there when you come just now, but he gone. Wait. Bombadil went to several of the other villagers, deftly speaking with them over the situation. Where had the man gone? It was not long before he was back with them, rubbing the back of his neck with his hand. No villager saw him leave this village, but no villager know where he go. Even his things all gone. He had big bag. It's all gone. Maybe they had entertained an angel unaware? David marveled to himself. He noticed that Peter and Mary were also stunned. They couldn't quite believe what they were hearing, but as they looked around at the excited and eager faces of the villagers, they realized that something truly remarkable had occurred. They looked at each other, silently agreeing that they were in the presence of a higher power, one that was helping them in their mission to bring education and knowledge to the remote tribes of the jungle. As the days passed, the team worked tirelessly, teaching the people to read and write. They incorporated games and activities into their lessons, making the learning experience enjoyable. And the people, in turn, were eager to learn the Word of God, soaking up every word and every lesson like thirsty sponges. The future looked bright for the Mangari and the Karamunga tribes.